كيف السبيل
Humanity sets the agenda.
تصنع المستحيل.
Welcome back to the show, and it's been a very interesting conversation with those two ladies, Shakir Rahman Saleh and Shaista Token. So go ahead and follow them, and let's see if you can get enticed through those narratives. Talking about getting enticed, now we're going to be dealing with the subject that I don't think the men are going to be very, should we say, excited about, but we decided we have to discuss this particular topic. So with me, I have on the line Mr. Peter Ucko. Let me just tell you a little bit about him. He is the CEO at the Tobacco, Alcohol and Gambling Advisory, Advocacy and Action Group. So he's going to be talking to us about how you can beat smoking addiction. So I think it's imperative that we discuss this, because many times we don't realize that this also affects our wellness and our being. So we need to have a look at it. A very good morning to you, sir, and thank you so much for joining us on the Mid-Morning Show with myself, Nafisa Dangle.
The mid-morning is the best time of the day. Thank you so much. Happy to be here with you, and salam alaikum to all our listeners.
Wa alaikum salam, and I think it's been an absolute privilege. I really appreciate you taking that time out to be able to discuss a topic that I think many men are not going to be very pleased with me after this show. But I thought it was something pertinent and important to discuss. Before we get into that, talk to us about the inception of the Tobacco, Alcohol and Gambling Advisory Advocacy Action Group, because I think it's important that people understand the messages and connotations behind it.
Yes, certainly. The first thing is that there's a very long story, and I'll try and keep it as short as possible. I got involved in public health and legislation and tobacco control about 45 years ago. I was involved in public life, and I just didn't enjoy the fact that there was smoking in public places, in the rates hall where you went to pay your municipal fees and your lights and water account, and in the traffic department when you used to renew your motor vehicle licenses. So when I served on the town council in Edendale, we took a decision eventually. In 1989, it was finalized to ban smoking in all public buildings. And that was the first actual ban and tobacco control legislation, a smoking ban in public buildings. And then I spent the next 2 decades or so being involved in tobacco control, working with the Ministry of Health and the legal advisor to the Ministry of Health, and eventually addressing Parliament on the proposed legislation in about 1997. And in about 2000, I became formally involved in tobacco control with an NGO. After about 12 years, I left the NGO, and a lot of friends of mine said, Peter, we can't lose your knowledge and your experience, your energy. And then they always add a word which I quite enjoy, your passion. We must start another organization. So there's a group of people who actually started TAG, Tobacco, Alcohol and Gambling Advisory, Advocacy and Action Group. And that's where we are now, fighting against tobacco companies, the tobacco industry, and smoking in public places. But please understand this. We're not fighting smokers. Smokers are just ordinary people, most of them very, very nice, decent people, who got addicted to nicotine. It's the smoking and the tobacco industry which is actually the enemy. And the smokers we'd like to help to quit. That's where we are today.
Yeah, I so agree with you. And I think it's, as you were saying, it's not targeting the individual, but should we say creating the education behind it and making people understand the types of negative effects it has on the environment, the people around you, and of course, the individual themselves.
There's no question. You start with the individual themselves, because they are the ones who are sucking smoke into their lungs, consciously and deliberately sucking harmful chemicals and tar and nicotine, which is a highly addictive drug, into their lungs. We don't have to enumerate all the harms that it causes, but in a nutshell, smoking and tobacco causes disease, disability, and death. That's for the individual. The people around you, and it doesn't matter whether it's your family, your friends, your colleagues, but especially younger children, they are hugely affected by secondhand smoke. And secondhand smoke is what comes, there's three levels of smoke. First of all, there's side stream smoke, which comes off the tip of the cigarette. That's in the room and it hangs everywhere. Secondhand smoke is what the smoker inhales.
I so agree with you that you brought up that fact, and I'm glad that you did, because I think in many instances, people don't realize that the people that are getting the secondary smoke are affected a lot more than those that are smoking physically.
Yes, very often they're hugely vulnerable. They get not only the secondhand smoke and the chemicals and the toxins, the poisons that are in that smoke, but also the same third-hand smoke. Because the smoke in a room settles on the floor, on the curtains, on the carpet, on the ceiling, on your clothes and your skin and in your hair. And then when you walk over those carpets or sit on a couch, all those poisons are released again into the air. And the people around you breathe them, and it is harmful.
And exactly that's what's happening. Many a times, I think people don't actually realize that, and I'm glad that you brought that to the fore. Let's talk about how do we entice people into getting a better, should you say, wellness environment for themselves when it comes to this? Because as we know, nicotine has many serious effects on the system itself. It's long term. It's not something short term, and it's not something that you can get rid of in a hurry. But you got to realize the importance of having to kind of give it up in some way. But it's going to have to be a gradual thing, I would say.
Well, it depends on how you look at it. For some people, to do it gradually is the process. Sometimes the effects are very quick and sudden, and you can have a heart attack or get lung cancer and die very quickly. The long-term harms are, for me, actually worse, because if you have a heart attack and you die, then you are dead, and maybe your family's lost a relative or a breadwinner even, but the pain is over. The problem for the smoker and for their families is that if you get something like emphysema, you have a long-term debilitating disease, and you end up struggling to breathe, actually fighting to breathe, and you become disabled. You struggle just to move around and to live a normal life. And in that struggle, not only do you suffer for decades more, but your family suffers with you. And that's really very, very bad. That in itself should be an incentive to say, you know what, this is not good for me. I recognize it's not good for me. I'm going to break this addiction to nicotine. And then some people do it gradually, but the best way and the best long-term effect is spontaneous cessation. There might be somebody listening to us now who says, you know what, Salam Media is right. What I hear there is right, and I quit. Right now, I am a non-smoker. I've stopped smoking. And the key is not to say I'm trying to quit. Don't try to quit. Actually just do it. Say, I quit. I'm a non-smoker. You tell your friends and everybody else who know you as a smoker, I'm a non-smoker. And you have friends who smoke. You tell them, please recognize that I'm now a non-smoker. Do not smoke in front of me. Do not offer me cigarettes at all, ever. I'm a non-smoker. And let's start. The spontaneous way is very often the most long-term successful.
Mr. Ucko, I have a very interesting question for you. How would you, I mean, a lot of people, you know, they find that the cigarette is the way for overcoming stresses, and that's the kind of excuses they use. But then they look for alternatives like these, vape cigarettes and those kind of things. Would you say that is equally as harmful?
Let me answer the first part first, and that is the matter of stress. When people smoke, they do feel, and it's a very real reaction, they inhale the nicotine. It takes about 10 seconds to get from the lungs into their brain. And if they're anxious or stressed out, really part of that is the withdrawal symptoms from your drug addiction. You're withdrawing symptoms from nicotine. And it's very uncomfortable. And if you're stressful, when you take that puff in 10 seconds, the smoke and the nicotine has gone into your brain, and you feel relieved. But it's an illusion. It's false. It's a chemical reaction in the brain that actually lets you feel as if you're less stressed. The truth is that whatever's causing the stress is still there. It does not go away. The only thing that went away is the craving. And by feeding that craving with nicotine, you are guaranteeing that it will come back again. So the only way to kill the craving is never to feed it. So you get over the craving, and it gets weaker and weaker. The time between the cravings gets longer and longer, and eventually you don't get cravings anymore, and you quit and you're a non-smoker. So that's the first thing. The illusion of stress is just a chemical reaction in the brain. It feels real to the smoker. But now, in addition, you actually, as a smoker, know that every puff you take is harmful to you. It puts you closer to perhaps lung cancer. It puts you closer to perhaps emphysema. It puts you closer to perhaps diabetes. And diabetes can lead to gangrene and to amputation of limbs. So all those things you actually know, and you're actively doing something that you know can harm your body, and that in reality causes more stress. So the smoking to relieve stress, it's not true. It's an illusion. Now let's talk about the other thing about these electronic nicotine delivery systems and devices that people use. They are technically, or it has been suggested, that they are less harmful than smoking directly. The problem is that they are causing very, very different harm. And people delude themselves into believing that they can use this as an interim measure to quitting smoking. Now, what happens for many users of these electronic devices is they become dual users and they use both. So when they can't smoke, they suck on these electronic devices. They still get hundreds of chemicals in the aerosol that they suck into their lungs, hundreds of chemicals, which are harmful. And then they become dual users, and in between, when they can't smoke outside in the garden or the parking area, outside their businesses, and smoke tobacco, and ignitable tobacco, combustible tobacco that you burn. So they might be slightly less harmful, but let's not delude ourselves. I'll give you an example. If you are standing on the motorway, let's say you are hit by a small little motor car, let's say a city car. It's a small little 1,300cc motor car. It weighs maybe 1,500 kilograms. It's doing 60 kilometers down the motorway, and you're standing in front of it, and it hits you. Now imagine you're standing in the same spot on the motorway, and along comes a 25-ton truck that's doing 100 kilometers an hour and hits you. With which one of the two would you be less dead?
That gives a person a lot of food for thought, I must tell you that.
Yes. So if you're smoking cigarettes, you're smoking electronic devices, they're harmful.
So I get what you're saying. Irrespective of which option you go for, at the end of the day, literally either or are really not good for your health. Let's talk about reaching out. Many people would like to, and we do know that there's a smoke-free helpline. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, that hotline started in about, I think it was 1994, when the legislation was passed to have health warnings on tobacco products. Our health warnings are therefore decades old, and they should have changed. We should by now have big pictures and graphic health warnings, and that legislation is in the pipeline. It's been delayed too much and too long by bureaucratic processes and socio-economic impact assessments and all sorts of things. And at the same time as the small worded health warnings were put on cigarettes, the tobacco quit line was put there, and that is 011-720-3145. If you phone them, and we don't have anything to do, TAG doesn't technically or necessarily have anything to do with that quit line, but you can phone them, and they should be able to help you, and they have a little booklet that they can post to you, or even email an electronic copy to you, and that should help you to quit smoking. The key issue is make the decision to quit. recognize all the problems and say to yourself and to your friends and your family, I quit, I'm a non-smoker. And then there's many things that you can do to follow up on staying quit and a non-smoker. I'm happy to answer your questions about that, or listeners' questions if they're going to phone in, and then we give specific information that specifically is needed by people.
Yeah, I'm sure that, I think what we'll do is we will put up the details on our social media site, so people can, always get in touch with you to be able to get further information on how they can deal with it. Because, when we look at this type of situations, everybody deals with it in a different way, but it's how we can support them and guide them through whatever challenges it is they're facing when it comes to this particular aspect. We seem to be running out of time, so I just like to get some information from you with regard to what is it that you think is the most important thing viewers need to know about this particular aspect of, should we say, smoking and the withdrawal symptoms, and making them also understand that you are there as that support structure. So we want people to understand that it's not something that they're doing, and if they want to leave it, that they're alone. There's help out there.
Well, you have my mobile number, and you can give that to listeners who want it, and they can call me. I can help them. They can also call that other line and get that little booklet. But the first thing and the most important thing is that I've already mentioned. Make the decision to be a non-smoker. Put away all your cigarettes. Don't give them away to anybody else. So you don't want to encourage other people to smoke. Maybe go into the garden, dig a hole, and bury your cigarettes and say, that's it, they're gone. And you're now a non-smoker. And then there's a few things you can do. Remember, when you get a craving and you have the temptation to put smoke, and it's a very strong craving and it affects you physically. You don't want to light up a cigarette. There's a few things you can do, and we call them the 5 Ds. First thing is drink water. Drink a glass of water. It helps you settle your craving, and it takes a little time. So the next thing is delay the decision to smoke. And when you have that craving, you can say, I feel like smoking now, but you know what? I'll delay it for 10 minutes. So it's now about 12. 20 to 1, I'll consider if I want to smoke again. And then at 20 to 1, you might say, you know what? I'm not going to smoke, because actually the craving would have gone. The other is discuss it with your friends. You might say to a friend, or phone me up and any of your friends and say, you know what, I feel like smoking. So you distract yourself by talking about other things. And when you distract yourself, you're not thinking deeply about the craving and the urges you have, very physical urges to smoke. You're talking to somebody else about some other things. And hey, the craving just goes away. It's almost like magic. It just needs a little time.
Right. Mr. Ucko, we seem to be running out of time. I really appreciate the fact that you've taken this effort to be able to, should we say, educate us with regard to the issues that we face as far as our challenges are concerned with giving up on something as important as this, because we know how important it is to look after our health, especially now during the COVID-19 period. And we want to thank you for educating us on the subject itself. But I'm going to, of course, like I say, get our guys to put some stuff up on social media so people could always refer back to it. And I'm hoping to tap into you so that we could do more information with regard to this. So thank you so much for joining me today on the Mid-Morning Show. And
it's my pleasure. We can talk about this anytime again. And what I would suggest that you preempt it by asking your listeners to send in specific questions, so we can immediately get into answering their specific questions. I'm happy to do that at any time.
I'd love to do that. We definitely will look forward to educating them. And as you say, it's important because there will be some form of interaction there. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it once again, and hoping that people can reach out to you to get a better quality of life. Have a lovely one, and do stay safe.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Peter Ucko, and definitely interesting topic about wanting to give up smoking. But, as we know, it's easier said than done. And it was some really good insight there where we got some form of education on how to kind of deal with it. We're going to go for a quick break. Stay with us. After the break, something really interesting. We're going to be joining Africa Muslims Agency. They've just come back from Lebanon, and there's some very exciting things happening there as far as empowerment and upliftment is concerned. So stay with us.